The Business Visibility podcast series is brought to you by my strategy sessions. That's 90 minutes of pure focus on the growth of you and your business. Go to angelarasmus.com/strategy for more information. Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Hey, I've got a free gift for you. It's a wonderful resource I've created that goes along with this podcast series. If you go to angelarasmus.com/visibility, you'll be able to download the workbook, and it helps you create and implement your own visibility plan. I hope you'll find it really helpful. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Next Chapter Business Podcast. I'm Angela Rasmus, your host, and I'm extremely happy to welcome you to another episode in the Business Visibility series. Now, these are interviews and conversations that are exposing you to smart strategies to help you raise your personal brand profile and connect with more of your most aligned clients. And I've been talking to the most amazing women and men from all over the world who have expertise in very specific areas. And today, you're in for an absolute treat because we're speaking with Alison Jones, the founder of Practical Inspiration Publishing over in the UK. Now, I am just starting on my own wee journey into the book writing world, and there is no doubt, as well as fulfilling a personal dream, I've always imagined walking into a bookstore and spying on somebody, taking my book off the shelf, flicking through it, and then running up to the counter. Might be a bit different in the digital publishing world these days, but in addition to that personal goal, there is no doubt that bringing your ideas into a book and harnessing the authority that flows out from there can have an enormous positive impact on increasing the visibility of your business. But I could be preaching to the converted here because Alison can certainly take us down this path and explain how bringing a book into the heart of your business, so it is entwined throughout it, is such an important task to put your mind to. Alison, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Good to be here, Angela.
So what I like to get started with when we're having these conversations is to have a little bit of a delve into the backstory. This is all about, what I tend to talk about with my clients is the next chapter of their business, the next chapter of their life. And of course, you have this fabulous business now, Practical Inspiration Publishing. But tell us a little bit about the backstory. What led you to here in your previous chapters?
Yes, your previous chapter. Well, I've been in publishing all my life. I'm hesitating saying that because it sounds ridiculous, but actually I was a reader, and I consider that as being in publishing, if we're stretching the definition. Loved books. In fact, as I was trying to work out what I was going to be, when it became clear that Ballerina was kind of off limits, really, that wasn't going to happen, I was thinking, I'm going to be a lawyer perhaps. And then I sort of woke up with this awful, I don't want to be a lawyer. What am I doing? And had this moment of clarity where I thought, actually, books, that's what I want to do. I want to be a publisher. I want to make books. So I went into it quite dewy-eyed and naive. Actually, publishing is, low paid, hard work, all the rest of it. But you do get to make books, and it is just the most satisfying job. So I started in publishing just as it was all starting to fall apart in the early 1990s when the netbook agreement had finished here in the UK and digital was just, hoving into view. So I've kind of been in publishing for 26, 27 years now. And throughout that entire period, we've basically been in crisis. So it's been quite a ride. And I went into digital publishing. I was one of the first people to go into that. So I was director of digital publishing at Macmillan for quite a while. And then more broadly into innovation and strategy. So I became director of innovation strategy, basically just trying to work out how publishing works in a world where suddenly you don't have to pay for the transmission of content and everything is free. And, this is problematic if you make your business selling books. So, to be honest with you, I would have stayed in publishing, I think, all my life because it's my world. I love it. I love the people. I love the balance of creativity and commerciality in publishing. That's the thing that really gets me. It's just it's a business, but it's a creative business, and that's really fun. But Macmillan, the company that I was working for, decided to move all their staff into London. And we live in the countryside. We live near Basingstoke, which is where they used to be based. And so I had that decision, and I was coming up to 45. I'd done an MBA, quite a while ago, and I always talked about running my own business. And it was that, oh gosh, well, if not now, then when? So that's how it happened. I would never have left had it not been for the fact that it was sort of forced upon me. And in taking stock, I thought, you know what? I think publishing is broken. I don't see how I can set up a business making money from the sale of books. It's so low margin, it's so risky, and it also feels against the times. It doesn't feel like what I want to be doing. I want to be doing things that are at the edge and looking forward rather than trying to preserve this model that really isn't fit for the modern age. So I was getting out of publishing, and I trained as a coach. I was going to do training and facilitation and mentoring and coaching. And that was great, and I loved doing it. But I discovered very quickly that all my clients, as soon as they found out that I was a publisher, all they wanted to talk to me about was publishing their books. So Practical Inspiration was born kind of like a full circle. The thing that I do that publishers don't do is the coaching piece. And I'm very clear with my authors that very, very few people make serious amounts of money from the sales of their book. And if we go into it open-eyed and say, do you know what? Your book is a really powerful tool for your business. And if that's going to work for your business, then actually that could be massively more valuable than anything you're going to get from the sales of the book. So it's much more about aligning it with where you're going, which means getting clear on where you're going up front, and making sure that the process of writing that book is designed so that it maximizes the benefit to your business, to yourself, actually, because it's a really powerful self-development tool that makes it clarifies your thinking, but also your platform, online and off, and your network. And when you approach writing a book like that, and then you look at the book as a tool within the business, then suddenly publishing does work really well because the book still has such a high cultural value. And so that's where Practical Inspiration came from.
That's wonderful to hear how it came full circle. And I've actually heard that sort of concept before, that we look at a part of or a lot of people that I've spoken to, we look at a part of the industry we've been involved in and we see it's breaking. Things are changing. It's really being shaken up and it doesn't fit any longer. But then one of the things that we find ourselves doing quite often is being able to find a new way of approaching it, of not exactly fixing it, because that wasn't your role to go in and fix publishing, but it was a way of finding how the amalgamation of your skills, your experience, and your desire, because my God, I know what you mean about being a book lover. Since the moment I could get my hands on books, like I've been exactly the same. And so that desire was never going to go away. And I love the way that you've rolled all those pieces together into what Practical Inspiration stands for today.
Exactly. And it has been an absolute joy. I mean, I still can't quite believe I do this every day. It's brilliant.
Aren't we lucky? That is for sure. Well,
yeah, right.
That piece that you were talking about, and this is where I think you have a very, really, really interesting take on the role that a book can play in someone's business. Now, there's many incubator programs here in Australia where a part of the overall business building, business growth trajectory is you must write a book. But yeah. and I do understand that does give you positioning and authority in the market. It makes sense. It can help put you there and be seen as an expert in your field. It can increase the likelihood of being approached for speaking gigs, etc., etc. But the way that you talk about the actual process of writing the book can be as important and as beneficial visibility-wise with your business and the building of it as the actual publishing itself. Can you dive into that a little bit more for us, Alison, as to, okay, here I am, holed away in the corner of my bedroom, writing my book. How is this agonizing process helping my business at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a good question, because I think if you go into this with I've got to write a book, I'm going to set aside this day, I'm going to shut the door, I'm going to write the book, write the bloody book, as it's quite often, it turns out. And it's a chore and it's something that's separate and it's got to be done and you resent it. And then it's done. And hallelujah, I never have to write the book again. And that is a way to write a book. And many, many people do it and it's done. And you know, maybe they get lucky and maybe it works really well. But I just think they're missing a trick because actually that time in which you're writing the book and you're doing the research and you're eliciting the stories and reaching out to people, that can be such a fertile, productive time for building your platform and your business as well. As I said before about the idea that books have a real kind of cultural value, there is still something interesting, immediately just appealing to people about the fact that you're writing a book about a topic that they care about. And it gives you permission to reach out to people in a completely different way than you might otherwise do. So for some of my clients, for example, they have approached CEOs in companies where they wouldn't normally have an in and asked for an interview so they can talk about an aspect of leadership. It's a flattering way to be approached. I want your expertise in this area. I'm creating something original and valuable in the world. And people are much more likely to say yes to that than I'd like to come and talk to you about my business and whether I can sell you my services. It's just a different quality of conversation. But of course, when you have that conversation, you have the relationship, and who knows what can come from that. So that's what I mean about the network stuff. In a sense, that's networking upwards and outwards, but there's also other ways that you can network. So for example, when I was writing my book, This Book Means Business, I was really careful to involve my tribe in it. So the Extraordinary Business Book Club on Facebook, and I put up the entire manuscript and asked for feedback and, shared when I'd finished the draft and I was celebrating. So everybody kind of had a stake in that book. And many of them joined my street team to help launch it and get it to #1 and so on. So that was about really building excitement and community and yeah, just being in relationship. So there's lots, if you think about your stakeholder map, there are the rock stars in your field where you wouldn't normally have a hope, Oprah. Probably Oprah isn't going to have an interview for your book, but you never know. It's much more likely than if you were just to kind of say, do you fancy coffee? So there's the people right on the fringes of your network, maybe 2 or 3 connections away. But, writing a book gives you a much better chance than usual of reaching those people. And then you've got the potential clients, as I was saying before, the CEOs who might have bought in her coaching services. You've got your existing community. It's about growing, about giving them a focus for energy, because, there's nothing sadder than a Facebook group where really nothing's exactly happening. And also your peers and potential partners, people who are in fields adjacent to you that you can perhaps reach out to for a contribution or as a beta reader. So there's all sorts of ways that you can use the writing and the process of publishing your book to build out your network strategically. And then, of course, the other thing is the content machine, because if you're in business these days, you're going to have to create content. It's kind of a needed to play these days. I'm really sorry if you're still resisting it. But if you're going to have to put content out there anyway, then using the book as the engine of that, so you can take a draft section that you've written in the book and put it out there as a blog post and see how it lands, see what responses you get to it, just test it out, get a sense of actually what do I think about this, and as part of the first draft. Or you can talk about the process of writing the book itself. That's also, as I say, good content to talk about, the meta story of the book. So when I wrote This Book Means Business, again, I kind of planned out, I used the podcast. So I was actually using the raw material, the stories and the experience of successful authors were going out every week in the Extraordinary Business Book Club podcast. And then I was drawing in the lessons from those and writing them as blogs. And then when I came to actually sit down and write the book, I mean, it was a Frankendraft. It was not pretty, but when I pulled all the stuff that I had generated in, I was at something like 30,000 words. I mean, and they weren't the right 30,000 words in the right order, but it was a great start. And none of the book is exactly what was put out in any form earlier on, but it all kind of evolved from it. So that, using it as the engine of your content strategy is a really powerful thing too. It gives it a purpose and an energy, and it feels like you're actually achieving something before you actually put the book out. I would say if you had a piggy bank and you put a penny in every day for a year, and this is not going to work in Australia, so you'd have £3.65 over here. but each of those pennies would have done nothing for you while it was just sitting there waiting for all the others to join it, But if you can use those pennies and get the return on investment in them and invest them smartly in your content strategy, then wow, just think what you could achieve.
I love that. So we've got 2 great new concepts here. We've got the piggy bank strategy, and we've also got the Frankendraft. That just absolutely made me crack up. And
that, to be fair, that was Derek Lewis, who I interviewed on the podcast with. I loved that phrase.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm going to hold that one too. Because yes, and this whole concept of perhaps this will sweeten the journey for our budding authors who are listening at the moment, that you don't have to sort of put your visibility on hold whilst you're writing the book. There is
no.
all these activities that can be happening that will lift your visibility in different ways. So it's working for you right from the start. But I think there's another piece here. Well, there's a couple of pieces that you make me think as you're speaking. The first one is that you'll have some accountability to people other than yourself, that you're actually bringing this project to life. And I think that could certainly help. Do you think that plays a role?
Do I ever? That's actually why I started the podcast.
Loaded question, that one.
Totally. I announced the podcast and said, basically, this is a way to force me to write the damn book because I'm now doing it in public. And yeah, I'm not an upholder. I wish I was. I'm an obliger, if you know Gretchen Rubin's tendencies. Yes. And if I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I damn well do it. But if I tell myself I'm going to do it, I might or I might not.
Yeah, so, I'm an obliger as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so many of us are. I'm also an extrovert. So I did find when I tried, and I did try, and I've written books before, I've been commissioned to write books, and I've done them fairly easily because they were for someone else. Hello, accountability. But when I tried to write my own book, with nobody holding a deadline for me, and just sat in my room and tried to sort of outstare the blank page. The blank page cannot be outstared, by the way. I could just feel the energy kind of leaching out of me. It was awful. I just remember sitting there thinking, I have nothing to say of any interest. My mind is blank. As soon as I get on a podcast and I'm talking to somebody, the ideas come flying out, and I get my energy from that interaction with other people. I need that creative spark of conversation. So I just discovered that actually that was the way to get the ideas, to get the content, and then I had to kind of retreat, and I left my family temporarily and I went into that deep immersive state of pulling it all together and shaping it. But to actually get the stuff done, I needed to be in relationship and I needed to be engaged with other people. So yeah, it worked really well.
I remember listening to one of your podcasts about how you'd gone away for that 5 or 6 days when you actually pulled it all together and emerged triumphant with a book. That was an inspiring episode, that particular one. Well,
but even that wasn't alone. That was with a friend who was house sitting, and we completely ignored each other all day. But it was great because there was somebody there to debrief with and to go for a run with, and it was lovely. I think extroverts can write books, but they need to be smart about it.
Well, being an extrovert as well as an obliger, I think you and I need to have a separate conversation. And so considering that, we understand now that the process of writing can raise your visibility. We understand that it gives you personal accountability. But what I'd like to jump into now is the concept that you very much say that the book should be brought into the core of your business, and particularly in This Book Means Business, the one that I've been reading of yours, when you talk about how your what I call a most aligned client, is often called an ideal client or an avatar of your business, should also be your most aligned reader, your ideal reader, and how the two really should be the same person to an extent, because if someone is going to be reading your book, for this book to really give you a great return on energy, they also will hopefully turn into some type of client of your business past simply reading the book. Could you talk to us about that process of how you decide who to write for and what?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you don't start with the reader in a sense, you start with the business. And this is why I go right upstream. So where is your business going? Who are the people you want to work with? Who are the decision makers? Because it can get a little bit more complicated than that. In its purest, simplest form, you're absolutely right. Your ideal reader is your ideal customer. And they spend hours hearing your voice in their head, engaged with you. And when they finish the book, they feel like they know you and they like you and they trust you. Unfortunately, you don't know them. And that we can talk about how you bring people online and into relationship with you. But, that's a really powerful tool. And if there's a gap between the people that you want to then, I was going to say pick up the phone and call you. They probably won't do that, but certainly reach out to you as a potential person to work with. And so you've got these people who are just ready to work with you. If they aren't the right people that you want to be working with, that's kind of, why would you do that? And it sounds so simple, but so often I have that conversation with authors and they go, oh, do you know what? I hadn't actually figured that out. I hadn't noticed that there was this gap. So that's quite interesting. Often they're writing for the people that they were serving maybe 2-3 years ago and they have this body of knowledge, but they're not making that step of saying, actually, who is it that I want to work with 2-3 years from now? Because, books have a long shelf life. So it's partly that. It can get complicated if, for example, you're writing for middle managers. I'm just trying to think about an example recently. And the people who you want, that your most valuable clients are actually the HR directors or the learning and development heads who you want to bring you in and do so. So you can sometimes have to be really smart about it. You can write for one group of people, but create products for delivering in corporate life that you have to reach out to the people above them. It can be done. You just need to be really smart about how you package that and how you then approach them. But yes, it starts with the business, and it starts with working out of the stuff that I'm doing now, what do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? Who are my best clients now? Who are the ones I want to reach out to in the future? And then you plan the whole process of writing your book, the people you're going to reach out to, as I was saying, for interviews, for commentary, all those people targeted at the people that you want to build those relationships with.
There's a piece in your, I think this is the Kickstarter guide that we can download off your website, which sort of, if you're in that throes of beginning to think about, yes, a book is going to be a part of my long-term visibility strategy. And in the third step, we're talking about selecting. You could probably think of, at least just reading from in here, at least 5 books you could write. And I love the way how you had this exercise of the circles, where you put a circle entitled like, here's my expertise, here's the area that I can really talk about with authority and depth. And then alongside that, you've got the customer needs circle. And then, so obviously what your clients are, as you were talking about, perhaps the clients that you want more of, what is it that they need? What are they looking for and reaching out for? And then we've got, I love this third one, the future circle, where you're looking at your industry and trends and technologies that are coming through that might change things. I think you experienced that one.
And absolutely.
And your business, like, where will your business be going as a result of, like, where do you want to take your business as a result of what's changing? And your customers, what might they need in the future? And so we're seeing those sort of overlay to find that sweet spot of what this book should be about. And I think the emphasis on this book, because you never know, you might write another one and another one. So is
exactly
that circle piece there, and we'll obviously point our listeners to where they can get a hold of this Kickstart document, because I found it really, really helpful when I was reading through it. But do you find that you use that circle concept a lot when you're working with clients to help them work out, okay, I want to write, I want to get visible, how do I do it? Is that one of the key pieces?
It really is, and it's something I developed. It's a sort of a development of SWOT, I guess, but it's just challenging people, because very often people just start with one of those. They just start with what they can write about, for example, and they say, I can write a book on this, and I've got a really good idea for a title, and off they go. And that, it's not strategic thinking. And it's a triangulation of all those elements, as you say. But the thing that they haven't tended to think about, you're absolutely right, is that future circle, where you're going in the future, and that's part of your business strategy, obviously. I encourage people to do their 20-year vision, because, in 20 years you could do anything. And that's the point. If you could do anything, what would it be? But then you bring that back. Well, if that's where I'm going, what does that mean for the next 5 years, 3 years, 1 year? And suddenly it gets much clearer. But it's also about, where are the opportunities emerging in this space? Because if you can get that sweet spot in the middle, where your background, your experience, your passion point you in one direction, the people that you want to write for and you want to work with are interested and engaged with this and asking questions about it, and there's an evolving, emerging opportunity where there's a gap in the market, if you like, there's a space where there isn't much, actually, and people are going to start asking this question, then, you've won the lottery of authorship. And you know what? Even if the book weren't in the picture at all, focusing your energy and attention there, developing products and services in that space, is always going to serve you. And that's really what drives it. It's always got to come back to what works for your business. When I talk about a business book, that's really what I mean. I mean a book that is a tool within, or a front end of your business. There's got to be something behind it. And that's where I always want people to start. And the book comes out of that.
Yeah, and that makes absolute sense to me. And that idea of not where you are now, but where you're going, and being really conscious of what it is that you most enjoy producing and delivering, in what way that the book could be pointing towards as well. Because I was looking at this concept of the lean book route, which you have in the download as well, and seeing where the book slots into your overall development of your business. So let's talk about your book for an example. that book itself, how does that fit into your business model? There's what I would call an offer staircase for how you bring people in. They first find you and then they move forward into your other services. So how has the book improved or increased your visibility in the market, and how has it served as an entry point, or where does it fit within your business model?
Yeah, what a great question. Yes, and you've probably seen the curve model in there as well. So this is a sort of variation on that. So this is really important. So I have the curve, and if you like that's sort of way that people find you, and then the way that they go up to work with you in ever kind of more engaged ways. Down at the bottom end of the curve is the podcast, if you like. That's the free thing that goes out there into the world. And the podcast and the book are so closely related. There will be another book at some point which will, come out of the podcast. But the relationships that I built up in the podcast, and the content that came out of it, the ideas, the tips, the quotes, and so on, fed directly into the book, which is terrific. So the book has a price, obviously, so that's a little bit further up the curve, but lots of people go on to read the book. And having read the book, they have, as I say, spent so much time with me effectively, and they've seen that I can actually help them. They've seen these models and tools that maybe they hadn't thought about before. They've noticed how much more clarity they have. And so many people from both the podcast and the book have come and said, oh, I found this, it was fantastic, and I think I need you talking to me about my book rather than in generalities. And this leads me on to a side point, which is that so many people say, oh, I don't want to put my best stuff in the book. I want to hold something back. Do you know what? Please don't think like that, because your book is a way that people are going to get a sense of what you're about. And the more value they get from reading your book or listening to your podcast or whatever it is that you put out there, the higher the value they're going to place mentally. We all do a sort of little heuristic, a little kind of mental arithmetic. And they say, well, goodness, if I get this much value out of just listening to her talk about general things or other people's books, what would it be like working with her on my book? And that's how it works. So people will then come and say, I really need your help with this book. I've got this problem, and I want you working on it with me. So that's kind of how it works. It's a lot of people, the podcast, the book is enough in a sense, and maybe they recommend other people who might then become customers. But for some people, every stage of the curve, people will drop out, and that is fine. For some people, for whom the time is right, for whom, who have the budget, who just really want more, they will move on to the coaching packages or the publishing packages or the mentorship program, which is sort of the top of my curve, if you like. And that's when I work intensively with somebody for 6 months, along with a writing coach and digital marketing expert. And we really just focus on every aspect, developing yourself, writing your book, obviously, developing yourself, developing your business, developing your platform, developing your network. And the publishing is part of that as well. So I commit to publish at my expense all the books that come out of that. So there's a sort of very clean progression, if you like. You can work with me on a one-to-one coaching package. You can sign up to publish with Practical Inspiration Publishing, and that includes coaching as well, because I don't want to publish books where I haven't been involved in that process. And then there's the mentorship. So yeah, it all fits together. There's a sort of natural progression through, and the podcast and the book, I don't know which would be more effective, honestly. Both of those work beautifully at bringing people into those one-to-one and higher price services.
Well, you've entwined them beautifully together. I mean, as you're saying, the podcast was like your personal accountability system at first, and then it's blossomed further than that in terms of, I mean, I love listening to it. I'm standing by for the new episode as it's coming out. So it's going along that journey with you. So we can see how that has really fitted into your business model. I mean, it comes back to if you want to bring it right back to brass tacks, in terms of people have a problem, you have a solution. They've had time to fall in love with the way that you do it. Your story, your stance, your style, the way that you show up obviously resonates with some, doesn't resonate with others, just as it always happens in business. So we can see how the book has worked beautifully into your own curve. From a visibility perspective, you spoke about the street team, and which I thought was a wonderful way of describing the people that are behind you when your book is first coming out to help make it more visible. Can you talk to that as a concept, not just the street team, but the whole concept of becoming visible directly as a result of the book?
Well, I'll take the street team first, and that phrase I owed to Carol Wire, who was a podcast guest who talked about. I thought it was such a great phrase. And of course, originally a street team literally took your book out on the street, and they sort of walk into booksellers and wave it at them, and it was a way of just getting that visibility. But what I discovered was that so many of my tribe, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? It sounds like I'm sort of, some sort of native leader or something, but so many people who had been in the Extraordinary Business Book Club, were invested in this book, had given me feedback along the way, were just interested in how it was going and involved with it, wanted to be part of the launch as well. So I created a street team. There was a sign-up landing page, and as a reward, if you like, for shouting about the book, basically crudely, they got a free print copy of the book. They got VIP entry to the launch, and also, do you know what? I think this was the absolute clincher. I ran a webinar on my whole process. So I lifted the lid and I showed them exactly how I'd put the street team process together, all the back end plumbing for lead pages and email stuff, and how I ran the launch and so on. And everybody was just sort of madly taking notes. And it was funny. Yeah. I published a book last month, and he was like, I basically followed your process. It worked really well. Good.
That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear.
But this is stuff that you don't, to me, this is just what I do. And it just occurred to me that actually this would be really interesting for the people who follow me. And that worked really, really well. So all they had to do basically was buy the Kindle, which I priced at 99p 99 cents on launch day. And they did that in their droves, and it went straight to number one in 3 categories, and it stayed there for a couple of weeks, which was amazing. It really had a great impact. And so the visibility of that and being able to shout about it on social media and show your bestseller flag, that was great. But of course, it wasn't just me. Because I had this fabulous engaged street team, and I gave them lots of collateral. So I put together quotes from the book on nice pictures and links and so on that they could share, so that they because it's quite hard if you don't really do social media very much, or you're not 100% confident that you've understood what's going on. It's very beneficial to give people stuff that they can confidently share out there and stay on message, So it wasn't just me shouting about it. There was this, hundreds of people putting stuff out to their followers. So the effect was amplified. There was a sort of exponential benefit to that. And also, do you know what? It was really good fun. So at the launch party itself, there was a sense that everybody wasn't just rocking up to, hear me talk. They were rocking up to celebrate what they'd done, that they all felt invested in that success of the book. So it was
they were a part of it. They were such a part of it. And listening to
what I did, yeah.
So when I was listening to the episode where everyone was at the launch party, you could feel the atmosphere and the joviality and the celebration and the feeling like, I'm a part of this. I'm not just here watching it. I'm actually a part of this. So that was a really tangible feeling when I was listening to that episode.
Oh, I'm really glad that came across, because it's exactly how it felt on the day. It really was magical. Yeah, I've been to a lot of book launches. Mine is still my favourite.
That is great to hear. Okay, so the street team were definitely helping with the visibility. And how has it affected or impacted positively on you within your industry now that we all know you as a publisher of fabulous books, but how did actually putting this particular book out into the market, how did that impact positively on your visibility?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because when I left my previous chapter and started my next chapter, there was an odd and slightly disconcerting missed step, because I was a director at Macmillan. I was very well known in publishing. I knew a lot of people. It sounds really arrogant, but you're kind of used to just being known and not particularly having to introduce yourself. And I spoke at industry events and so on. And then, of course, when I moved into this new space, I suddenly had to introduce myself to potential clients. And what do you mean you don't know? Of course they don't know me. They don't know me from Adam, because they don't know publishing. So it was a real kind of, oh, right, I'm going to have to hustle. I'm going to have to, sell myself and build up credibility and a network in this field as well, which is, oh, okay. So that was funny. But in a sense, as I did that, I still actually am quite well known in the industry. I still speak pretty well. But, being a publisher in publishing is not all that. There's an awful lot of us. So oddly enough, it wasn't so much the book as the podcast that has really got me visibility in a new way, in my new form, back in the publishing industry. And I was approached by Blackwell's, the booksellers, a couple of weeks back to say, would you write a regular business book review piece for us? And, sort of speaking at events and so on. And it's very pleasing, because it feels like I've made that transition, and I'm no longer, Alison Jones, director at Macmillan, but Alison Jones, director at Practical Inspiration Publishing, doing really interesting stuff with business books. And that was great. There's a kind of personal thing in there. That was something that I wanted very much to be seen as still pioneering in the industry. That's always been important to me. But it's great for really practical reasons as well. So I now get all the big publishers who publish business books come to me to get promotion for their business book authors, for example. I've now got a platform for them, as well as being a peer and a publisher. So you get taken just that much more seriously because you're doing something interesting.
Absolutely, and that having that platform and choosing which platform are you going to build? I mean, you could have chosen Facebook, you could have chosen many other different platforms, but a podcast makes perfect sense. And I love the niching of the podcast because it has that instant connection. The way that you've described it, when I came across it, was like, well, yes, I love reading extraordinary business books, and so bang, it communicated very clearly straight away. So the podcast has been a key part of your visibility strategy. That makes perfect sense.
Yes, this is turning into a plug for podcasting as much as it is for publishing books, isn't it? But I think the point is that they go together. If it were just the podcast and I didn't have the book, it would be that much weaker. If it were just the book without the online platform and other ways of engaging. Okay? So it's about thinking, what are the strands that I'm going to bring together that suit me? And there's no point you doing a podcast if you come out in hives when you talk to someone, that's not going to work for you. But so it's thinking about what is going to work for you, how you're going to bring them together, but making sure that they all amplify each other. So frankly, you're putting in less work for a bigger bang.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like synergistic. Once you bring 1 + 1 =, in your case, 5 or 6.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, if we think about the concept of these people who are sitting there going, I've been thinking about a book. But there is one quote here that I think I pulled out of the Kickstarter, which made a lot of sense. A little footnote, so to speak. NB, this book is for those with proven expertise and something distinctive to say. If that's not you, put this down and focus on building your business. So that's...
It sounds quite harsh when you read it like that.
But it isn't. What you're actually doing here, it's truth well told, because it is important to write a book at the stage of business when it is going to be of higher service to you and to your audience. Yeah. That's what you're basically saying with that quote. So how do we work out it's a good time to write a book? It's a good time to look at this as a visibility exercise for me.
Yeah, and I use that metaphor at the beginning of the book of making a cup of tea, partly because I'm British and this is what we do, but also because I think it does communicate. The perfect time to make a cup of tea is when you've got fresh water and it's just come to a rolling boil. And if you do it too soon before you've got a boil, then you don't get good tea because it's not hot enough. And if you let it, click off and go stale and sit and cool down, you don't get good tea because you've missed the moment. And that's the point. It's when you've got something that people are getting excited about, it's distinctive, it can help other people. Very often people, not very often, but occasionally people have come to me and said, I want to write a book. I've been writing a blog for 5 years and I've got all this material and it's just a matter of pulling it together and making a book. Let's just sit down and think about where the business is going and what it is you're saying. Because what you thought 5 years ago, probably irrelevant now. And certainly you don't want to be making that the public face of your business necessarily, unless you were very far ahead of the curve 5 years ago. So it is about having the credibility, author, authority, same route. And if you haven't got credibility in what you're saying, if you haven't got stories to draw on and a sense that what the methodology that you're putting forward actually works, it's just too soon. The water hasn't come to the boil yet. And there are too many bad books out there. We do not need any more bad books. I think having said that, the thing that maybe is the opt-out or is the sort of escape loop for this is if there's something you're really interested in, writing a book can be a great way to become an expert in it. You can take a more journalistic approach. But if you are writing from your own expertise, as I think most business books authors are, then consolidate the expertise first. Write a blog. There are lots of other ways of getting your stuff out there, of thinking through and getting clarity. I think, writing for yourself is such an underrated tool. Writing a book is obviously for other people, but there is a way of writing it's not quite journaling, it's not quite free writing, but it's something about, I've got this insight that keeps disappearing and I can't quite get it. So I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to write for 10 minutes and see if I can give it shape and form and understand it better. And nobody else needs to ever see this. But once you've done that work, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And that will move you forward in your thinking. So, that sort of form of writing is important as well. So just because you sit down and write, it doesn't have to be writing a book. And there's a point at which the water's boiling, it's ready to pour, it's going to be good tea, and that's the time to write your book.
And I believe you'll recognise that. You'll feel that quite strongly. And then, of course, you can always speak to someone like yourself and do some checking in. But I do believe that like, I've had the desire for a long time, but it's like the kettle's boiling.
Yeah, it's now time. It's time to make the tea. And one thing I do, which I maybe just mentioned for your people as well, is and a good part of my curve is the 10-day business book proposal challenge. Do you know about this, Angela?
Yeah, there's one coming up in September, isn't there?
There is. So it starts on the 10th of September, that's right. And I think that is a really powerful tool at a fairly low commitment level. It's literally 10 days, 2 working weeks, and we just go through the proposal document, which is pretty standard for non-fiction books. And I talk you through what the publisher's looking for, what you need to be thinking about, because obviously the proposal is a document for the publisher. It makes the business case for the book as a commercial product, if you like. But behind it is a lot of the thinking you need to do about, who is this book for and how does that fit with your business? And, how does it stand against the competition? How does it move the conversation forward? What's distinctive about it? So that, kind of almost whatever stage you're at, unless you've, handed the manuscript in, that's a really interesting and helpful exercise to do. So I'd really recommend people have a think about that if they feel the water might be coming to the boil.
I'll make sure that link is in the show notes on the page for this episode as well. And so
I can give you a discount code for that as well, actually.
Beautiful. I'll make sure that I pop that in as well. Well, Alison, there's probably one last thing that I'd like you to touch on briefly as we bring this beautiful conversation full circle. And that's, let's say someone knows the water's boiling. They're ready. The visibility is desirable. They've got ideas that are worth sharing. They know that this book can move the conversation forward, as you say, but they're scared. They get that. Who am I to, I can write a blog post, but who am I to think I can write a whole book? And those are all gremlins, the imposter syndrome, the inner critic. There's lots and lots of different umbrellas that we can put these feelings under. But what would you say to that person?
I'd say you're in really good company, because every single author, almost without exception, not quite, but almost without exception, every single author feels like that at some point. And I didn't know that. I should have known that. I've been in publishing such a long time, but I guess, in traditional publishing, you don't engage quite so much up front with the author, and that, they don't necessarily speak these gremlins to you. But it's, for business book writers, typically they aren't professional writers, and they're not academics either. And I've dealt with a lot of academics in my time, and they are sort of much less precious about it. They have to write. It's part of what they do. But if you are an expert in your business and you've got something really interesting to say, there is absolutely no reason why you should be a writer as well. It's just if you happen to be a good writer, that's brilliant, but it doesn't mean you're any more or less expert in your job. So I think business book writers are particularly vulnerable to this, partly because they're not professional writers, and partly because you're putting your expertise out there on the line, and that can feel really vulnerable making. So you're in really good company. Everybody feels like this. If they don't, I'd worry, frankly. And there's so many ways. I start right up front with mindset, in the book, and all this, a note about fear right at the beginning. And there's some really practical things that you can do. The things that will work for you might be different to what will work for other people, but I give you lots of sort of ideas. And I think one of the most fun things to do, at the end of the day, you just got to get over yourself and do it. But, the way to do that, I think, is to chunk things down. It's to inoculate yourself by just getting more visible one little step at a time, writing the blog post, writing the guest article, launching the podcast. And then when you produce the book, it's not this binary thing and you've flicked a switch on and suddenly, come out. It's just this progression of making yourself more and more visible, and it doesn't feel like such a huge cliff to step off. And you can just cheat. You can lie to yourself. You can say, I'm not going to post this blog. I'm just going to write it and see how it goes. And then when you're feeling really brave one day, you swig a coffee and press post before you, kind of notice. So you can lie to yourself if you need to. You can do what you need to do. Just keep moving, the next step, the next step, the next step. And suddenly you'll find it's happening.
That's great advice. So I think this idea of inoculating yourself by taking action, and inoculating yourself by having a good structured plan, which you can certainly start with when you read This Book Means Business. So I'd really recommend that everyone goes and grabs a copy of this. But Alison, where will we find you in the world? The Extraordinary Business Book Club podcast, I know that one for sure, but what's the main website you would like to send our listeners to?
Well, I guess there's three if that's not too greedy. So you can find out more about me at www.alisonjones.com. That's sort of my coaching and it tells you about all the stuff that I do. You can jump off pretty much anywhere from there. The books are at practicalinspiration.com. That's my publishing site, if you like. And the Extraordinary Business Book Club, obviously you can find on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever podcast thing you use. But it's also at www.extraordinarybusinessbooks.com. And I do put the show notes and all the links for each episode up on there. So, and the transcript, the full transcript. So if you've heard a particular one that you particularly wanted to dig into or wanted to, find out more about, then that's where to go.
That is fantastic. I'll make sure all of those links are on the page as well, so we can go and haunt you down in all your corners of the interwebs. And
it's all over. That's right.
Well, Alison, again, thank you for your time. If you wanted to leave just one thought with somebody who is sitting on that edge, who is sitting on the edge of going, okay, I know the kettle's boiling. I know I have to inoculate myself against my fear. What's the one step that they could take, say, tomorrow that could get them started on the path? Apart from going and grabbing your book.
You beat me to it. Well, the thought I would leave you with is actually a quote by Seth Godin, one of my heroes and one of the interviewees on the podcast, who said, "The book that will most change your life is the one you write." And I think that there's such a profound meaning in that, because we think, most of people who I talk to are thinking about the impact that the book will have on their business and their visibility and so on. Almost more profound than that is the impact it will have on you. And just as if you're into self-development, if you're into being the best you can be and fulfilling your potential, then there's not much beats writing a book.
I'm glad to hear that, since that's the path that I'm on as well. It's a wonderful quote. So thank you for leaving that one with us. And I look forward to staying connected and talking with you again very soon.
That was really fun. Thank you, Angela.
You're so welcome. And to you, my lovely listeners, do you have a book that is burning to come out of you? I really hope that this conversation with Alison has shown you some of those steps to begin with, knowing that you can add to the conversation. If that kettle was boiling, then you're in very, very good company if you're feeling that fear and that vulnerability. But you can inoculate yourself against it by having a great plan. So please do grab a copy of This Book Means Business. It is an excellent book, and that will help you get that plan and get started. And I'd love to hear about those developments that you have in your visibility quest. This is Angela Raspers. I'll be back again very soon with another episode in this Increasing Your Visibility series. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelaraspers.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.